Hello and welcome to this Rattle and Hum Sports podcast for Thursday, July 18th, 2013. I'm Bryan Houston, and with us right now to talk about the Dallas Cowboys, Rattle and Hum Sports contributor Matthew Postins. Matthew, the team packs up to leave for Oxnard, California on Friday. I believe first practice is Saturday, is that right?
I think so. I think they'll do a little walkthrough Saturday afternoon after Jared talks to the media, but the first real official practice will be Sunday morning.
Okay, are we going to see any fat, out-of-shape guys showing up this year like we saw with Felix Jones and company last year?
I don't think so. Nobody's really exhibited any signs in the off-season that they haven't been adhering to the off-season plan. What you could see in terms of if there are players out of shape, you could see players that have been nursing injuries for the past few months not be in 100% ready to go, like a Mackenzie Bernardo or a Nate Livings, guys like that who haven't been on the field enough to stay in shape. But I don't think anybody's going to be out there that won't be in shape or won't be out of shape due to neglect.
Okay, we'll get back to that in just a moment. First, the big story of the day. Josh Brent taking the Cowboys off the hook. They wouldn't make the decision. He decided to retire today. A very troubled young man and a sad, what could be possible end to his career. Talk a little bit about what you know about that.
Well, I have to admit, I really wasn't expecting him to be the one that would pull the plug on it. Certainly by retiring, that does get the Cowboys off the hook, not just from dealing with the situation, but it also gets them off the hook in terms of the money that he's owed on his contract. And granted, Josh Brent really didn't have any guaranteed money left, but still, there were several $100,000 there in salary for him over the next couple of years if he stayed under contract. He's in a situation where he needs to get his personal thing together. I don't think anybody would disagree about that. The timing is curious. It's a couple of days before training camp. The Cowboys were probably going to have to make a decision at some point because they worked out some guys earlier this week, and a couple of them were fairly impressive. The timing is just curious. I wonder if the Cowboys maybe nudged him a little bit. I'm not really sure. Usually retirement is usually a player decision, but the timing of this whole situation, the fact that he even retired in the first place is just a little curious to me.
Well, the one thing that we do know, most of the reports I've seen today were that there was absolutely no way that Roger Goodell was going to let him play this coming season anyway. Whether that impacted anything or not, I don't know as far as retirement is concerned. But that does take the cap hit away, is that right?
The cap hit for Brent would be in terms of base salary. There really wasn't a whole lot of bonus money attached to him. Bonus money is what really necessitated the cap hit. Mm-hmm. He was really sitting there with just a general average player salary. And base salary usually isn't guaranteed in the NFL, so that base salary comes off the books. But there's no real cap acceleration or no real significant cap hit to his contract moving forward.
Okay. The other major story, one that comes as no surprise, the Cowboys doctors clearing Tony Romo to begin practicing with the team when they go to training camp here this weekend after he had his back issues. Looks like he's going to be fit and ready to go.
It looks like it, and nobody within the organization really believed that anything like that, anything other than that was going to happen when training camp rolled around in mid-July. I think everybody felt as if Tony Romo was going to be there and that he'd be healthy, and that has certainly come to pass. I think you might see the Cowboys, be a little, gentler with him, for lack of a better word, in terms of how often they use him. But these days, NFL teams are usually pretty liberal with giving days off or time off to veteran players in training camp anyway. So I think it's a situation normal for Tony Romo. He's going to be ready to go, and the Cowboys, you're going to see the Cowboys give him a day off now and again because he knows the playbook, he knows the players, and they don't want to put him in a situation where he ends up getting hurt for no reason.
Well, not only that, but not in addition to training camp, they play 5 exhibition games this season. They're almost going to have to sign somebody, a third quarterback, just to get through all the practices and the extra games, right?
They do. They actually worked out a few quarterbacks earlier this week, including Kyle Padron, the former SMU quarterback who went on to Eastern Washington for a couple of years after his career kind of dried up at SMU. They had a couple of guys in camp with Tony Romo and with Kyle Orton taking reps. And right now, you look at that roster, and you can see they've got 3 quarterbacks because they released Dalton Williams earlier this month. So, right now, 3 guys. If they're going to give Romo some time off during camp, then yeah, they probably need to go out and get a guy that can take some reps and throw some passes to take some of the wear and tear simply off of Tony's body. And it could be Kyle Padron, it could be somebody else. And with Josh Brent retiring, this does give the Cowboys an opportunity to sign one of those guys while staying under that 90-man roster limit for training camp.
Of course, one of the great highlights of the beginning of training camp is to listen to Jerry Jones' story time as he meets the media.
Story time.
You know,
I like that.
Yeah, it's
I
like
like that.
He's so close to Disneyland that he starts to sing "It's a Small World After All" over and over again. And give you a story about how good they're going to be this year. What do we expect to hear from Jerry Jones this weekend when he gives the State of the Cowboys address?
Well, it's funny. With Jerry, you can hear anything, and he's going to be speaking to the media around 10 a.m. on Saturday. You can get anything under the sun with Jerry Jones when it comes to these sorts of things.
Remember last year he won a glory hole last year. Remember that?
Yes, he did. He did, and theoretically, he knows what that means. But theoretically, last year that did not happen. So perhaps we'll hear more of Glory Hole this year. But I think you'll hear Jerry be his usual relentlessly positive self. I think he feels as if what they've done in the offseason, specifically on the defensive side of the football, with bringing in Monty Kiffin and Rod Marinelli, I think he believes that they've done enough to fix the issues that the Cowboys had last season, even though on paper, when you look at this team, aside from Monty Kiffin and aside from Rod Marinelli and aside from a couple of guys here and there, it's basically the same team that they were a year ago. They're just healthier. The guys that were on the IR at the end of last year are healthy now, and you've got a new defensive scheme. So I think you're going to hear a relentlessly positive Jerry for most of the press conference on Saturday, and that's no real big surprise.
Will Jason Garrett be allowed to speak?
On Saturday, I don't know if he is on the schedule to speak. I mean, obviously, Jason's going to speak to the media every day during camp. They might give him a day off. Typically the way the Cowboys work, Jerry gets the opportunity to speak first, and then whoever the head coach is gets to speak later on.
Well, and usually the head coach sits with Jerry, and then whenever Jerry's done, the head coach gets to say, yeah, what he said, mostly. But I'm just wondering, with the way things have gone this year, Bill Callahan might be the guy sitting on the podium with him this year.
Well, hopefully Jerry has enough sense to make sure that the head coach is sitting next to him during that press conference and not anybody else. If you're going to have Bill Callahan up there, why don't you just have Jason Garrett, Bill Callahan, and Monty Kiffin up there? Just invite the whole coaching staff with you up there on the podium if you want to do it that way.
Hey, that could happen.
The thing is with Jason Garrett, you're going to get a lot of quotes about the process, and at this point, Jason Garrett really doesn't offer you that much in the way of a quote anyway.
True.
Not that that's really any knock on him. Most head coaches don't give you any quotes these days anyway. So even if he is given the opportunity to speak on Saturday morning, I think I could actually sit down, put pen to paper and notebook, and tell you what Jason Garrett is going to say. Or at least I can hit the high points, and I think I'll be right.
I have a lot of my interviews from last year's training camp, and I bet all I'd have to do is just edit in a name or two different and probably have pretty much the same story.
Yeah, it saves you a lot of work right there. I mean, that from a media standpoint, that's actually very helpful.
It is. It makes it a lot easier. Then you can go out and play a lot more. Anyway, talking about the Cowboys then as we get ready for training camp, the one thing that we do see is that the roster, for the most part, is almost already set. I mean, is there anybody that's going to? Are there any major decisions looming for this team concerning who's going to make this team and who isn't? What are the, if there is a key battle where somebody's on the bubble and might make it or might not, who's that going to be?
Well, in terms of making the 53-man roster, you're probably looking at defensive line and offensive line as being where your bubble boys are. There are a couple of guys in the offensive line that I could see being cut, that being Nate Livings and Mackenzie Bernadotte. Now, I know they're both veterans, and they were both starters last year, but if you look at the guys that are behind them, and Ron Leary and David Arkin, these are a couple of guys that the Cowboys are very, very high on, especially Leary, who had a tremendous offseason. Everybody raved about his growth from year one to off-season year one, in terms of strength, in terms of how he handles the playbook, in terms of how he handles blocking fundamentally. Everybody's very happy with his progress. And you've got a couple of veterans in Livings, who was kind of banged up during camp, and Bernadotte, who really didn't participate in camp much at all due to surgeries for the second straight year. I think you're going to see a lot of competition at those two positions, and I think potentially you could see one of those two veterans getting cut if Leary or Arkin show that they have the ability to be a consistent starter from the get-go in September. So there's a position right there, a position battle where I think it's not about starter versus backup like it is at right tackle. I don't see either Doug Free or Jeremy Parnell going anywhere, whoever loses that battle. But at guard, I think it's a little bit more about who's going to stay and who might go.
Okay. Any other positions? I did see that Lawrence Vickers was released. Did that surprise you at all?
A mild surprise, and the only reason being is that Vickers is one of the better fullbacks in football. He's blocked for 3,000-yard rushers. He can give you a little value added out of the backfield because he can catch passes. He's a very good special teams guy. He's a good locker room guy. But the fact of the matter is, if you watch this team last year, they really de-emphasized the fullback position, and it wasn't just because they were playing from behind so often in games. That's really just where the playbook took them. This year, when you consider they have been all over this whole 12 formation, which is the one back, two tight end formation, and they really intend to use either Gavin Escobar or James Hanna in tandem with Jason Witten quite a bit. Well, you've got two tight ends, you've got five offensive linemen, there's 7 guys. You got your 2 wide receivers out wide, that's 9. Then you got your back and you got your quarterback, that's 11. You really don't have a whole lot of room for a fullback at this point. So a fullback, especially a fullback who is going to count $1.2 million against the salary cap for you this year, is more a luxury than a necessity. They could use a guy like a Kyle Wilbur or a James Hanna as a lead blocker, and they did that a little bit during training camp just to see how it would work. But I really don't think you're going to see the fullback being a big part of this offense this year. It would not surprise me at all. Instead of them going out and getting a fullback, they keep 4 running backs. I think that might be part of their logic in letting Vickers go. They might want to keep both Dunbar and Tanner as backup running backs, along with Joseph Randall and the starter DeMarco Murray. So I don't see them going out and re-signing a fullback at this point.
Okay. There is also the issue of injured players who may have a slow start in training camp, among them DeMarcus Ware, Jay Ratliff, Mackenzie Bernadotte. What do you know about those guys?
Well, Bernadotte is probably going to be the one who gets off to the slowest start because he's the one that worked out the least over the off-season. For the second straight year, this guy had off-season surgery, and for the second straight year, we didn't see him very much on the practice field. And I think his inability to get on the field and work out with his teammates and get into the philosophy of the offensive line really showed in the first half of last year. Now, I thought he played serviceably the second half of the year, and you definitely saw his ability to take one for the team, and when she played center for 2 games, even though it was a position he had never played before. But we're right back in the same position with him, where he didn't work out very much during the offseason because of injury. But now you have the issue for him of a guy like Ronald Leary, who's playing extremely well right now. As for Ratliff and as for Ware, they didn't play very much, but I think the difference with those 2 guys is, at least in this with this particular team, in this particular defense, they've played at a high level. Nobody doubts Ware's credentials. Ratliff has played at a high level. I think there's less concern about those 2 guys having not played very much during the offseason than Bernadotte.
Okay. I saw comments this week. First of all, Bill Parcells says the Cowboys are lucky to have Jerry Jones as an owner. What did you make of the interview that was done with Bill? Of course, he would say that now after he quit after 4 years, too.
Yeah, I'm sure his tune was much different when he was walking the sidelines here in Texas a few years back. It's the same old conversation we have about Jerry. From a business standpoint, yes, the Cowboys are extremely lucky to have an owner like Jerry Jones, who not only understands how to make money in the business of football, but also how to squeeze every last dime out of merchandising, out of marketing. And this is a guy who when the NFL basically told him you can't make Dr. Pepper the official drink of the Dallas Cowboys, said, fine, I'll just make them the official drink at Texas Stadium. And he created a whole new marketing paradigm within the NFL. I mean, in that respect, he's an absolute trailblazer. And like with Mark Cuban, he's the exact guy you want owning your football team. The problem is that unlike Mark Cuban, Jerry Jones is the general manager, and that's why I just can't get on board with what Parcells is saying, that the Cowboys are very lucky to have him. If the Cowboys were truly lucky to have Jerry Jones, he'd have nothing to do with player personnel.
And if that were the case, Bill Parcells would probably still be the coach of the Cowboys right now.
Well, knowing Bill, probably not.
Well,
but
true.
That's a good point.
Good point. Yeah, you do make a good point there, but he would have lasted more than 4 years, I think, because
he might have.
He left a great team. He left argue whatever you want to, but the program was in terrific shape when Wade Phillips took over the next year, and then it was dismantled within 2 years. But they had a great team the next year under Phillips.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what that playoff team, the one that went to the postseason shortly after Parcells left, it makes you wonder what that team could have done had Parcells been the one pulling the strings as opposed to Wade Phillips.
Absolutely. Okay, other issues as far as training camp is concerned. Is this team going to be? I mean, I understand what Jerry thinks is his reality, but is this team literally going to be better than 8-8 this year?
I think it's possible, but the real issue is when I look at a team going into the season, I rattle off how many ifs, as if to say, this team will win a division title or will win a championship if. And to me, the fewer ifs you have, the better chance you have of winning a championship. Well, the Cowboys still have a lot of ifs, in my opinion, and it boils down to if they run the football better, if they force more turnovers, if they make fewer mistakes on offense, if some of these younger players really make a push to get playing time and can make an impact on the football field. If Jerry Jones stays out of everybody's way, if the paradigm between Bill Callahan and Jason Garrett really does work, and Callahan can be the guy pulling the strings and calling the plays and being successful. If the Cowboys take to the cover 2 defense, if the Cowboys this, if the Cowboys that. I mean, there are just too many ifs for me to sit there and say with confidence that they're a lead pipe lock playoff team. If some of those things fall into place, yeah, they could be a playoff team, absolutely, because they have the talent. But there are a lot of variables in that, in my opinion, that keep me from saying that they're anything more than perhaps a 9-7 team at this point.
In your Rattle and Hum Sports columns over the last few weeks, one of the articles you wrote had 5 Dallas Cowboys who are primed for a fall. Who are those guys? Which guys do you see that a lot is being expected of, and who are going to fall short of those expectations?
Well, Ratliff was in there, certainly, and I know some people will probably argue with me about that. A lot of people believe that he's going to be a guy that's going to come in and really take this cover 2 defense, and he may very well be a guy that does that. But you look at his production over the past 4 years, and his sack numbers have dropped every year. And a big part of the cover 2 is getting to the quarterback. He's been banged up the last couple of years. He missed 10 games to injury last year. He's 31 years old. I think that it's just as likely for him to continue to decline as it is for him to have a bounce-back year. Will Allen was on this list because I think the Cowboys are really fallen in love with Matt Johnson, and the 10-year veteran is going to have to step up his play if he's going to get a starting job. I don't know that his roster spot's in danger necessarily, but he definitely is going to have to step up if he wants to be the starter. Bernardo's on that list, and we've talked a little bit about him already. Jason Hatcher's on this list because I'm not sure how well he's going to fit into this defense. I think they've got him in the right place at the one technique, but again, here's a guy who, really didn't become a starter until 2011, and it's really hard for me to look at him and say, yeah, okay, he's the right fit for that position. So, again, he's 31 like Ratliff. I'm wondering if he's more of a 3-4 guy than a 4-3 guy. We're going to see. And then my last guy on that list is Miles Austin. And there are a few different variables. Obviously, the injuries. He's never really had a major injury, but he has all those nagging hamstring issues that sort of limit his production. You've got the whole Terrence Williams situation now. Dwayne Harris has emerged a little bit. Both of them are cheaper options. And Austin's contract is a significant drag in the Cowboys' salary cap situation. It's certainly possible that Austin's numbers might take a dip this year, as much because the Cowboys are trying to diversify themselves offensively and really trying to sell into this two tight ends philosophy, as it is, that Austin could be banged up for a few games because of his hamstring.
So it wouldn't be the dire season over if a guy like Miles Austin ended up going bust this year.
I think it's possible the Cowboys have the tools to pick up the pieces if Austin were to miss significant time. I mean, the real question is, I think what the Cowboys want to do is they want to use Miles Austin in the slot because they want to use Williams and Bryan on the outside. So who takes that slot position? And the most likely candidate is Dwayne Harris, who I thought had a nice second half of the season last year. And plus he gives you the value added of being the kickoff returner and the punt returner. So I don't know that it's a massive hit if Miles Austin misses significant time. I think you'd rather have him on the field because I think he is the type of receiver that can flourish in the slot, but I don't think it's a season killer if you lose him for significant time.
Argue with me on this one. Tell me what you think. Right now, I think the key to this season is the health of DeMarco Murray.
If that's not the key, it is one of the three most significant keys to the season. The Cowboys have to run the football better, and I've harped on it since last year when you'd watch games where DeMarco Murray's actually running the ball, 4.0, 4.2, 4.3 yards per carry. We've talked about this before. It's not about the amount of yardage you gain. It's about how much you gain per carry, because the more you gain per carry, the better chance you have of putting your offense into shorter down and distance positions when they're trying to throw the football. And shorter down and distance situations mean fewer mistakes by your quarterback. Even in situations when he was running the ball well, they ran away from the running game. And some of that had to do with the offensive line. I think some of that just had to do with the fact that Jason Garrett just flat out wanted to throw the football. So, when you look at this offense and you look at the fact that really, production-wise, they weren't that far away from being a playoff team. It was really more the mistakes and the turnovers that they were making rather than how they produced. What's the missing link? Well, their running game was second worst in the NFL and one of the worst in Cowboys history. So you look at that and you say, yeah, you've got to run the football better. And it starts with getting DeMarco Murray healthy, getting him the football 15 to 20 times a game, getting guys like Joseph Randle and Lance Dunbar to be able to spell him for 5 or 10 touches a game, and getting that push up front. And when you look at the backs in this team, DeMarco Murray is the guy that has to stay healthy for 16 games, that has to be productive. If it's not him, then the running game will probably sputter again, no matter how well the offensive line blocks.
And your dog agrees with you, I see.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'll give you the last word. Anything left out that we haven't talked about? Any final thoughts as we get ready for training camp to start this weekend?
Well, you know what? The one thing that I find interesting, and you brought it up earlier about having the 5 preseason games, that's always a little bit tricky when you're an NFL team and you're playing that 5th preseason game. And they used to have the games overseas in Tokyo and London, and they've kind of done away with those. You now really just have the one preseason game and the Pro Football Hall of Fame game, and it can run both ways. It's a great showcase and a great opportunity for your team to get extra reps, but it's also 60 extra minutes for your team to get banged up. And the Cowboys have 90 guys in their roster, but let's be honest with you, there's really only 53 that matter, and those are the 53 that make the team coming out of September. And right now I'm getting ready to file my defensive story in which players I think have to make the roster, and then offense will come after that. You talked about how DeMarco Murray is the key to this season. That's one of the big keys. Another one is this team has to stay healthy because they're not an old team, but they're an older team, and there's a big gap between their older, mature, successful players and the younger players that are trying to make a name for themselves. There's none of those mid-range veterans on this football team. So in order for this team to be successful, the older guys have to stay healthy, the younger guys have to stay healthy, and that's going to be a huge key as we go along, because we saw the Cowboys last year get banged up in an 8-8 season, so banged up that they had to bring guys in off the street in October and November just to fill roster spots. It's a significant part of the equation, and that's something that bears watching as we go along because they have that 5th preseason game.
Well, Matthew, it's great talking to you as always. I really look forward to breaking down story time with Jerry Jones after the opening address next weekend, and we can go through line by line the fairy tale and have a great time doing it, I'm sure.
Absolutely, man. I look forward to it as well.
Awesome. Hey, Matthew Postins, be sure and read all of his Cowboys coverage on Rattle and Hum Sports. Thanks very much for being on with us today, buddy.
Thanks, Bryan.
Okay, Matthew Postins from Rattle and Hum Sports covering the Cowboys. I'm Bryan Houston. This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.